Hey everyone, Firegross here, and today we're going to be talking about the hidden potential of the new item Mageblood. So Mageblood was the new build that was previewed today with the Scourge reveal, and it's really insane. However, a lot of people are glancing over it and aren't really acknowledging the true potential of the item, because they're just sort of looking at this and saying like, okay, well, we can keep our jade flasks or our granite flasks up permanently, and that's what it does. If you're reading this and you're really understanding what it does, basically just means that 4 of your magic utility flasks, as it says, are going to be permanent, right? So your jade flask, quicksilver on your silver flasks, granite, basalt, stuff like that. These flasks, you can't turn them off, you can't use them, they're just always active, but only 4 of them, not 5, and it won't affect life flasks, it won't affect mana flasks, it won't affect unique flasks. But that doesn't really matter because this is honestly mind-blowingly insane anyway, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. Okay, so the whole premise behind the hidden potential of Mageblood comes from the Alchemist prefix as well as the Enkindling Orb. The Alchemist prefix provides 25% increased flask effect at the penalty of reduced duration, and Enkindling Orb next patch is going to be providing 70% increased flask effect at its max roll. Now, you can combine those to 95% increased flask effect, but it does have the penalty of never being able to attain flask charges while your flask is active, as well as having reduced flask duration. Neither of these penalties actually matter while you have Mageblood, and that's why this is crazy. And I've prepared some combinations of affixes to sort of lay out just how busted this is. So an Alchemist Biosmith Flask of Resistances is going to give you 35 Ores as an implicit, 30 Ores as a suffix, and then combined with this setup is going to basically provide you 126% to all resistances permanently. That's right. This item gives 300 and I believe 78 resistance through 1 flask. Okay, now, you think that's crazy? A diamond flask with the order suffix is giving you 160% crit, and then it gets increased up to 312% increased critical strike chance, which is permanent. That's a lot of increased critical strike chance. Now here's one that all the juicers are going to enjoy, and I know I was certainly giddy about this combination. A Quicksilver Flask of Adrenaline with this setup provides 105% increased movement speed with the new buffed Adrenaline mod next patch. That's right, 105% movement speed permanently from your flasks. And that's even without the Onslaught buff that you're going to be getting from a Silver Flask potentially, or just from the Onslaught buff. That's going to be another 20. And just so I can cover it before any of you guys wonder, Silver Flask doesn't get buffed by the setup, so we're probably not going to run it. You're probably going to look to run Onslaught externally. 105% is still kind of really crazy, though. So rounding off the generic combinations are the Jade Flask of Reflexes and the Granite Flask of Iron Skin. Now you can substitute Stibnite and Basalt Flask in here. I will kind of cover them later, but basically with this setup you would get 2,925 flat evasion or armor and 117% increased evasion or armor, which is a pretty significant amount. On its own, it's about, basically 6,000 evasion or 6,000 armor, plus the buff that you're giving to your gear, but yeah, that is an insane amount of defenses from a flask. So we'll take a look at just the implicits on some flasks here. Now, the Ruby Flask, if you buff it up using this setup, you will still have a suffix open, so you can pick one from the next section that we're going to do. But basically, the Ruby Flask with just a prefix and an Enkindling Orb is going to give you 39% less fire damage taken and 97% fire resistance. Now, this is the equivalent of having roughly 10% additional max resistance. Now, this isn't going to take up a flask slot, but it does kind of open up the opportunity of hypothetically running a Ruby, a Sapphire, and a Topaz Flask to basically have 10% max res in every slot, and one of your suffixes can be of resistances, which is going to give you a huge buff to your resistances. Pretty much going to cap out your resistances right there just through having these 3 flasks plus 1 suffix, and that opens up 2 suffix slots for other things. But this is potentially also really crazy because this is just straight up a lot of damage reduction against bosses that, if you have some other way of, say you're playing a armor-based character and you have a lot of ways of getting physical damage mitigation into your build, but you don't have any elemental mitigation, this is the way to do it, right? 40% less damage taken from elemental damage it's pretty crazy. You are giving up 3 flask slots, but I mean, come on, right? And then the Basalt and the Stibnite Flasks, sort of a similar deal. So you can get up to 39% more armor, 39% more evasion, and you can run the suffixes that we talked about on the generic one, the reflexes or iron skin. You also may want to run them in conjunction with, you may want to run a basalt flask with a granite flask or a stibnite with a jade. You can do whatever you want. But here are some interesting stats that I pulled out. So if you run a Basalt Flask and a Granite Flask with Defiance Banner and Determination, you can get 27,781 armor without having any armor on your gear or your tree or anything. So just your flasks and just your auras. So just 60% reservation and 2 flasks with a Mageblood, 27, almost 28,000 armor, and similar thing with evasion. If you're using a Jade Flask, a Stibnite Flask, what suffix is it? The Reflexes suffix, and then you're using Grace and Defiance Banner, well, 19,000 evasion. This is a pretty significant amount of both. I think it's actually going to be really crazy when you're running, like, just as a hypothetical setup, like, follow me here, right? So, you could have a bossing setup where you're running a Bismuth Flask, a Diamond Flask, and then, like a Basalt and a Granite Flask, and suddenly you have all your resistances capped through one flask. You don't have to have resistances on any pieces of your gear. You have 300% increased crit, and then you have 28,000 armor, not even counting any of your gear, which it's crazy. It's crazy. It's actually really crazy. I think what a lot of people are going to be able to do in this setup is run a armor evasion hybrid setup in their gear, and then they can just run the Jade Flask and the Granite Flask of Reflexes and Iron Skin, respectively, which I think is going to provide a really good combination. And then you just have to run Defiance Banner. You can probably skip out in Determination and Grace, and you're going to have a very respectable amount of both armor and evasion without having to invest much, and that still gives you room for your other flasks. And remember, like, we're using 4 flasks here, but you're still going to have room for a life flask or something else in the 5th slot. Okay, I'm going to talk about suffixes now. There are some pretty nice things to be gotten from suffixes. So the 29% reduced mana cost mod, which is going to be a new suffix added next patch, although you can, I believe, get 25% now via the order suffix. That's going to become 57% reduced mana cost permanently. That's a big deal. There are a lot of builds that are really going to, you may care about this. Like, this is a large enough amount from just the suffix that you may care about this. And remember, these are just suffixes, so you can combine them with the implicit only setups I was showing last in the last section, right? So you can combine this, like if you're running the Ruby, Sapphire, and Topaz setup, one of your suffixes can be this. This is a pretty big deal from just a suffix. Acceleration and quickening are going to be able to provide 33% increased attack speed or 33% increased cast speed each. Again, a really big deal. Now, the order mod, 50% chance to avoid stun. This is giving you 97% chance to avoid stun. Although if you're able to find 5% increased flask effect from some other source, which is really easy, you can find in a build. I believe you can find a bunch of sources on the tree. 100% chance to avoid stun, you're immune to stun. This is really nice, again, from just the suffix, like one suffix and you're immune to stun. Pretty poggers. 55% chance to avoid shock, chill, and ignite. So these are coming in the next patch. And yeah, that's just going to make you immune to that ailment. Now, you can run them just in conjunction with the Ruby, Sapphire, Topaz setup, and now you're ailment immune. I think there are probably better ways to become ailment immune. I don't know if, like, dedicating one suffix each is the way. You have to consider that these suffixes are probably good normally on flasks, but considering that we're, like, focusing on trying to buff the effect of flasks up, I think the opportunity cost is really high on these suffixes, and like there are some other really cool things that you can get here that you can't get elsewhere. Like 57% reduced mana cost is something you can't really get elsewhere, whereas you can become immune to ailments elsewhere. So I'm thinking the ailment immunity stuff, you're probably gonna miss out on. The order suffix, which gives you regenerate 3% of life per second, is going to give you 6% life per second. Now, this is mostly a really big deal for Petrified Blood setups, as well as the Righteous Fire setups, and the people running both, like 6% perma life regen. That's insane, right? I know we use that word a lot around here lately, but what do you want me to say, right? Like, what? This is just one suffix on one of 4 flasks. A lot of people are underestimating this build. Let's just put it that way. And then finally, the last thing we're going to talk about is the order suffix. 15% of damage taken is recouped. So you will then recoup 29% of the damage you take over 4 seconds. I don't know if this is a big deal. Recoup is kind of good, and it's also kind of not that good. There is a new body armor that's going to give you, I believe, 100% damage taken recoup as life as a mod. I don't know how that's going to play out. I think the jury's still out on recoup as a stat. Some people say it's like really good, some people don't, and I guess it's kind of situational. If you're taking hits frequently, then I don't think it's, so I think the recoup effect can override itself. I don't think it like stacks up, so I could be wrong on that, but yeah, I've been told it doesn't stack up, and it just kind of overwrites, which means that you want to be getting hit pretty infrequently, so you probably want like a really high avoidance build, rather than a build focusing on damage mitigation, or maybe you want to use this like a bossing setup where you're not planning on taking hits very frequently. I'm not sure. And I also believe that it doesn't work on dot damage, but not sure. But yeah, I just thought I'd point this one out for people who are sort of interested in this effect. I'm not. I might be. I don't know. We might do testing. But yeah. So this is insane. You know, that's just the only word for it. Like, to be getting all the, you have to consider, like, with the Mageblood belt and one flask, all your resistances are now capped. Like, from -60 all the way up to the cap of 75, right? And then, because the Mageblood belt gives fire and cold res inherently, you're only going to be missing 9% lightning res with a Bismuth flask in the setup. And if you have any amount of flask effect on your tree or anything like that, you can easily pick up the last 9% that you need with that tiny bit of flask effect. Or, you know, like, I'm sure it wouldn't be hard to pick it up off gear or something like that. But yeah, and all of a sudden, you don't have to worry about resistances. This is really big for attribute stackers and stuff like that. You know, like an attribute stacker wants to, a lot of the time, essence craft their gear, and you'll be able to just essence craft your gear where you're spamming your gear only with the intention of getting a good life roll and maybe some other attribute that can help you meet attribute requirements or stuff like that. You know, like strength stackers, int stackers. This is a huge fucking deal, right? You can also pick up rolls like accuracy, attack speed more freely. The new dot multi mods, you know, you can just go for these without caring about resistances. And you can, you know, using this, you can easily cap your chaos res. This is crazy. Like, this alone is a very big deal and makes Mageblood worth wearing just on its own. But then you get to pick 3 other effects, which is crazy. And so, you know, if you think about 300% increased crit strike chance, Brittle's not getting nerfed. So, next patch, if you run Brittle with like a spell or a weapon that has, say, just 6% base crit, you know, just look at the math on this, right? So you have 21% crit with max Brittle effect and your base crit, and then just with the increased crit chance from your Diamond Flask, you're at 87% crit chance. You're almost at capped crit just from a cold ailment and a flask. What more do you want? You know, like, this is going to also enable Marylene's Fallacy played with the crit catalysts, where you're getting, you know, like hundreds upon hundreds of crit multi pretty much for free, because you're going to still be able to cap your crit really easily, even with the 40% less crit that Marylene's giving, or I think it's 48% with catalysts. You know, 105% increased movement speed from your Quicksilver. That's just huge. It's just huge. You know, like, a lot of the power that we lost from Flasks, we're getting back here, and I'm going to be totally honest, you know, like, in content, in non-Nemesis currency content, or like non-Deli content where there aren't going to be a whole ton of rares, this is probably going to be my go-to belt. You know, I don't think any other belt comes close to giving the kind of benefits that this does, and potentially if you're going to be doing the Bismuth thing, you're going to be building around having the Mageblood, so you may not end up getting to run the Headhunter anyway, but the amount of power creep that your build now has as a result of having all your Scourge mods, and all your Flasks, like, it's insane. It's really insane. You probably won't need Headhunter. You know, if you get a really nice build with like a, you know, a moderately high investment, and then you have like good Scourge mods and everything, and the Mageblood belt, maybe you don't need the Headhunter to do a lot of the content that you want to do. I'm still at a loss of words for how just busted this is. I know I said the Stranglegas was probably going to be like Hateforge rarity. I think this might be as well. I think Chris already alluded to it being really rare, but I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, all these items are like Headhunter rarity and they're all going to like hit the market at 100+X, because these are really insane chase items, and I think it's really good because the game has thousands upon thousands of items, and a lot of them are very, yeah, I'm all for accessibility for casuals. Anyone who watches me knows I'm a huge advocate for making content that is accessible to casuals. But one thing I will say is that chase items have been they don't exist, right? There's no other way to describe it other than the fact that they don't exist outside of Headhunter, really. Headhunter, Hateforge, Badge of the Brotherhood kind of was like an old chase item for a bit, kind of. And maybe like 1 and 3 passive voices if you want to think about it like that. But the game has really been lacking in chase items. You know, big, powerful items that are going to cost you an arm and a leg. You're probably never going to drop one. I've played for probably close to 6,000 hours now. I've never dropped a Headhunter. I've never dropped a Mirror, and I'm okay with that because I still buy them every league. This is something I could definitely look forward to spending 100x on. I will not hesitate to make this kind of purchase given the power that it gives. And the other thing to consider is that you have to think of this the same way you think of your Headhunter, your Bottled Faith when you buy those items. These items are usable in pretty much every character you have. Pretty much, right? Obviously there are exceptions, but Mageblood, once you buy it, this is now the belt you're going to be using on every character you make. If you reroll 10 times in a league and you play 10 different builds, they're all using Mageblood, right? And I know a lot of people saying, like, this is going to be really insane for bosses. This is just going to be really insane, full stop. You're going to be using this while you're mapping, in a lot of cases. For a lot of regular mapping situations, like, there just aren't enough rare mobs in order for Headhunter to be good. With the way that it's looking like Scourge League is being designed, so rare Scourge League mobs are going to be dropping insane amounts of items and currency. So there are mods that make rare Scourge mobs drop 3 maps, for example, or a Scarab and stuff like that. I don't expect rare Scourge mobs to be anything but rare, right? I expect them to be rare. You may not find one in a map. So that means you're also not going to be stealing very many Headhunter mods. So I pretty much think Mageblood is going to be the BIS belt for most builds that are interested in running juiced Scourge content, potentially. Maybe I'm wrong. Or maybe you do a thing where you swap. I don't know. Maybe you swap, maybe you don't. I think we'll have to sort of play with it and get a good feel for it. It also kind of depends on how important Scourge content is versus the other content when you're juicing maps. It's hard to say. I do think if you are building around the Bismuth Flask stuff, then you probably won't have the option to swap between that and Headhunter, of course. But, it's going to be really crazy. Just imagine these 4 stats on top of this, right? So this item's still giving you resistances. It's still giving you some attributes. And then on top of that, you're still gonna have the opportunity to put Scourge mods on it, right? So that, all of what you saw, plus, for example, that, it's gonna be very hard. I can't see any other belt beating this. This is just, it may even get nerfed. I'm thinking about this. The more I think about it, the more I'm thinking, like, this is gonna be nerfed to like 3 utility flasks by next league or something like that. It's just, yeah. Anyway, that's the video. I'm just gonna sit here and like be dumbfounded at how crazy this is. If I keep recording, I have nothing else to say really. But yeah. So I know a lot of you guys have been messaging me, asking me if I'm going to be doing videos covering all the content coming out. I don't like doing that sort of thing, where I just sort of read back the content that's already been refilled that you can consume on your own. I'm only going to focus on making videos on topics that I feel other content creators aren't covering. I don't want you to, generally I want my audience to feel like the time they spend watching my channel was worth it. I don't want them to feel like they spent 20 minutes watching me just regurgitate content that other content creators are putting out or stuff they could have read themselves. I want you to feel like if you come to my channel and watch my content that you're going to learn something new. You're going to find out something that the other content creators aren't talking about. You're going to have your mind blown at some crazy new thing that's being put in that a lot of other people are missing. So that's going to be the content between now and the start of the league. I am planning on putting out a league starter as well. I may not. We're going to, that's still up in the air. It kind of depends on passive tree and whatnot. But yeah, I will still be putting out content, but I'm not going to just do the generic videos where I'm just, regurgitating content that's already out there and just repeating back to you, reading off a screen stuff that you can read yourself. That's not what I want this channel to be about, and it's also not something I particularly enjoy doing. Stuff like this, where I talk about something that other content creators have missed. That's the stuff I live for, really, and that's what this channel is going to continue to be about. If you like this video, give me a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.